Hello, this is Short Stories. I'm your host, Martin. Today's short story comes from a book written by Giovanni Boccaccio called The Decameron. I did a story from this book last semester, and I liked the book so much that I decided to do another one this semester. This story is about a woman who had two annoying men trying to date her. She used her wits to get rid of the two suitors in a hilarious fashion. But before I can tell you about how she tricked them, I must first tell you about the vocabulary and example sentences. At the end, I will read 4 listening comprehension questions. Let's get started. Vocabulary. Widow. Widow. War creates orphans and widows. Infatuated. Infatuated. Bill was infatuated with the young woman. Condition. Condition. The conditions of the contract are clear. We will not pay you until the job is done. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. We haven't bought the plane tickets yet. Don't book a hotel now. Corpse. Corpse. We laid the corpse in the tomb. Assuage. Assuage. The father tried his best to assuage his child's fears. Jeez. Jeez. Jeez, that was the worst movie I have ever seen. Well-to-do. Well-to-do. Most of the well-to-do families in this town are members of the local country club. The story. In the city of Pistoia, there once lived a very beautiful widow. Her name was Madonna Francesca. Being beautiful as she was, she soon became the target of men's affections. But there were 2 men who were particularly interested in her, Ranuccio and Alessandro. Neither man knew the other, but they were both infatuated by Francesca. They would try very hard to win her affection through silly and annoying gestures. Ranuccio gave her a portrait of himself. "So you can enjoy my handsome smile every day," he said. Alessandro was a bit dim. Mostly, he would give her chocolates that had expired or flowers that made her itch. "How will I ever get rid of these 2?" Francesca said to herself. Then she had an idea. Francesca's plan was simple. She would ask each man to do a task that they were sure to fail. She sent her maid to Alessandro's house first to deliver a message. "Madonna Francesca sends this message to you," said the maid. "The time has come for you to enjoy her love, provided you fulfill the following conditions." Alessandro smiled excitedly and said, "Yippee! My flowers worked! We'll get married tomorrow." The maid held up her palm and said, "Hold your horses. You're not getting married just yet. You still need to fulfill the conditions." The conditions that the maid explained were these. First, Alessandro had to go to the graveyard at night and locate the grave of Mr. Scenario, an infamous man who had just recently died. Second, he had to open the tomb, remove the body, and put on Scenario's clothes. Finally, Alessandro had to lie down in the tomb as if he was dead and wait for someone to come and pick him up. "Without saying a word or making a sound," added the maid, "allow yourself to be removed from the tomb and brought to her house, where she will welcome you." Alessandro nodded his head in agreement so hard that his eyes crossed. "Anything for my sweetheart," he shouted. Next, the maid went to Ranuccio's house and gave him a similar message. Madonna Francesca says that she is ready to fulfill your every wish, announced the maid, as soon as you do her a great favor. Ranuccio smiled and laughed. I knew she couldn't resist me forever. What woman could say no to this face? The maid coughed and said, Don't you want to know the favor you must do? Ranuccio listened as the maid described his assigned task. First, at around midnight, he had to go to the tomb of Mr. Scenario. Second, he had to remove the body. Finally, he had to bring the body back to Francesca's house. The maid added, You must do this without uttering a word, despite what you might see or hear. Ranuccio agreed to the terms. Night fell and Alessandro was the first to begin his task. While creeping silently through the darkness, a thought suddenly occurred to him. Hey, what kind of fool am I? Where am I going? Maybe this is all a trap. He stopped and stood in the street pondering this for a moment. Then he said, Nah, she loves me. She would never do that. Alessandro continued on his way to the graveyard. He did as he was told and removed the corpse and put on his clothes. While lying in the cold, dark tomb, Alessandro's thoughts began to wander again. He became very scared that Scenario's corpse would reanimate and attack him. What if a ghost tries to eat me? Said Alessandro as he shivered. But just as before, he assuaged his fears by thinking of Francesca's love for him. While Alessandro was resting in the tomb, Ranuccio began his task. And like Alessandro, he too mulled over some ideas while he walked to the graveyard. He thought about all the ways his mission could go wrong. He could fall into a pit, get caught by the police, or worse, get caught by Scenario's relatives. They might punch me in my face, he thought to himself. But Ranuccio strengthened his resolve and said, Is a great man like me going to turn away from a challenge, especially one that will win me the prize of a lady's heart? No. Ranuccio reached the graveyard at around midnight as planned. Ranuccio picked up Alessandro and carried him on his back. Geez, what did this guy eat? He's heavy, groaned Ranuccio to himself. He then tried his best to carry the corpse down the pitch-black street. But because of the darkness and the weight of Alessandro, Ranuccio kept bumping into things. Ouch, he said on more than one occasion. Alessandro had it worse because he couldn't even say that. Eventually, Ranuccio decided to just drag the body as it was too heavy. Alessandro could feel every rock, pebble, and horse dropping as he was being dragged down the street, but he remained silent. Ranuccio was almost to Francesca's house when he was suddenly confronted by a blinding light and a gruff voice. Who goes there? Ranuccio knew who it was. It's the cops, he yelled. He dropped Alessandro and ran away as fast as his legs could carry him. The police stepped forward to investigate the corpse. They pulled off the burial shroud and saw a living man. Eep! Squeaked Alessandro as he also jumped to his feet and ran. Meanwhile, Francesca and her maid watched the whole thing from her balcony. Thanks to the light of the policeman's lamp, she could see Ranuccio dragging Alessandro before running away. And she also saw the look of terror on Alessandro's face as the police removed the sheet from his head. Francesca and the maid had a good laugh that night. The next day, the townspeople discovered that Scenario's tomb had been opened and that his body was missing. Also missing was Ranuccio, who decided to leave the city out of fear of going to jail. Alessandro, on the other hand, was more simple-minded. He tried to explain to Francesca why he had failed in his mission, and asked for her forgiveness. Francesca pretended not to believe him, and told him to try his luck with another woman. With the two annoying suitors gone, Francesca was finally able to enjoy the free and independent life of a well-to-do widow. The questions. Number 1. Why did Francesca want to get rid of Alessandro and Ranuccio? A. They were very friendly and nice. B. They were very mean and cruel. C. They were very silly and annoying. D. They were trying to kidnap her. Question 2. Which word best describes Ranuccio's personality? A. Humble. B. Modest. C. Vain. D. Responsible. Question 3. What was Alessandro's task? A. To bring back Mr. Scanadio's corpse. B. To pretend to be Mr. Scanadio's corpse. C. To burn Mr. Scanadio's corpse. D. To kill Mr. Scanadio. Question 4. Why did Ranuccio run away? A. He was worried about going to jail. B. He was worried about what Francesca would think of him. C. He was afraid of the ghost of Mr. Scanadio. D. Alessandro tried to kill him.